This is Update One, the podcast of the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. Update One provides a forum for listeners to learn about national and international stories, focusing on journalism and communication issues, news, and politics. Now, the latest edition of Update One.
We know from the Mueller report how skillfully a gang of operatives in St. Petersburg, Russia, played Made in USA social media to swing the election of a president of the United States after practicing their craft in Estonia, the Netherlands, France, and the Brexit vote in Britain. Now the Chinese are trying their hand, and the Iranians, and the Egyptians, and above all, some 400-pound guy sitting on his bed in the middle of America. I'm Irv Chapman, a longtime member of the National Press Club. On this edition of Update One, I'll be talking with Paul Barrett, a career journalist who spent 18 years at the Wall Street Journal, 12 years at Bloomberg Business Week. He's now adjunct professor and deputy director of the Stern Center for Business and Human Rights at New York University, which put out a series of reports on disinformation on the internet, the latest including ideas on how the creators of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, WhatsApp can better combat the manipulation of their social media to spread lies. Paul, first about the Russians. Mueller told us they're still at it, but you seem to suggest they were lying low in the U.S. election last year. What do you think they're up to in the run-up to 2020?
Part of what's a little daunting about 2020, of course, is that we don't know exactly what the Russians are going to be up to. You're entirely right that the amount of disinformation surrounding the 2018 midterms was negligible. I think the best guess coming from experts is that the Russians were just laying low, keeping their powder dry, so to speak, waiting for the much more consequential presidential race in 2020. There's one other factor as well. We don't know exactly how it plays, but the U.S. Cyber Command, a part of the military that deals with online combat, apparently was successful in taking the Russian operatives offline for a few days surrounding the November 2018 midterm election day.
How much of the election disinformation has been aimed at discouraging some groups of people from voting altogether?
Voter suppression disinformation is one of the major themes of the overall problem, and it's a good example to bring up because there was a fair amount of voter suppression activity on Twitter in connection with the 2018 election. And a lot of that kind of activity consists of telling people things like, this year, for the first time, you are allowed to vote by messaging, by text. Or this year, rather than being on Tuesday, polling will be on Wednesday. And those seemingly small, inconsequential pieces of advice can, of course, confuse people and end up resulting in their not voting.
The Chinese raised their great firewall to keep Facebook and the others out of their country. Yet haven't they been using those same media lately in their battle against democracy in Hong Kong? They
have. Twitter and Facebook announced that they had taken down a large number, something approaching 1,000 accounts and pages that the Chinese had used, in some cases with English language activity, to try to sow division among the protesters in Hong Kong. And the fact that the Chinese were signing up for Facebook and Twitter accounts and pretending to be Americans in some cases suggests that they may be getting ready to try the same thing directly here in the U.S. It bears emphasizing as well that Taiwan has elections in 2020, as the U.S. does, and I think it's a pretty sure bet that the Chinese will be involved there.
What can you tell us about other state sponsors of disinformation?
Well, the Iranians have made their presence known in the U.S. They have been for several years undertaking cyber attacks aimed at computer systems of hospitals, government agencies, and the like. More recently, they have tried information operations where they disguise themselves as Americans, in some cases even as American politicians, pretending to be real-life American politicians, tweeting. They have been active both on the left and the right, pushing sort of clashing positions, which illustrates that they're imitating the playbook of the Russians. And I think given the degree of tension between Tehran and Washington, it's a pretty good bet that the Iranians will at least be experimenting in 2020, if not launching an all-out information operation.
How much of the junk information that gets circulated to Americans on the Internet is in fact created by our fellow Americans?
Yeah, that's an important point. In terms of sheer volume, more disinformation is created and disseminated by Americans. We're, in a sense, doing this to ourselves. And that takes a very wide variety of forms, some of it bubbling up from anonymous message boards like 4chan or parts of Reddit, other material originating with quasi-news sources like Breitbart, and all of this can find its way to Twitter and Facebook, and often it's then amplified, if it's on the right, by Fox News. So there is a great deal of this material sloshing around that has its origins here in the United States.
What about companies that are springing up to create fake information for anyone willing to pay them?
Yeah, this is a relatively new phenomenon, not the existence, of course, of political consulting or image polishing companies, but the fact that they might be offering as one of their lines of service the provision of disinformation. And the most interesting cases that have surfaced so far actually have involved Israeli-based companies populated presumably by people who were involved with intelligence in the military. One such case was flagged by Facebook. It involved a company called Archimedes, which was not targeting the U.S., but was running disinformation campaigns related to political races all across Africa and in Latin America and Southeast Asia, a really sprawling effort. And Facebook got onto it and shut it down, but it provides a potential model for what might happen in 2020.
Well, as you said, the social media companies say they take down fake accounts by the billion with a B. That suggests that the quantity of disinformation in disguise is enormous, isn't it?
It is. The companies, Facebook, Twitter in particular, have gotten more aggressive, more vigorous in their ability to detect and take down fake accounts. And you're absolutely right that Facebook does take them down by the billion. In many cases, these are accounts that never really get off the ground. They are detected right as they're created. But the fact that they seem to be getting better at that function, as you suggest, may only indicate the huge volume of phony accounts and phony actors who are out there spreading this kind of stuff.
The latest techno threat seems to be manipulated video, so-called deep fakes. Could they be worse even than a hacked document dump on the eve of elections?
I think they could. I think for the simple reason that a convincing fake video is something that people might find more believable. They might say, I can see this with my own eyes. I don't have to read through complicated text or decide whether to take text as credible. I can see the images here. And deep fake video is that which has been created with artificial intelligence, and it's kind of a new generation of image manipulation, the kind of thing that Hollywood has been doing for some time, but at tremendous expense and with great expertise. And now with the improvement and dissemination of artificial intelligence, a wider array of people might be able to do this in a political context. And I think the main concern is exactly as you suggested, that on the eve of the election, if a candidate is portrayed as saying something or doing something they never said or did, there may not be time to correct the record. And in that way, deep fake video could have a tremendous effect.
Does that mean that, say, the Democratic debate of the other night, somebody clever could take Joe Biden's words and put them in Bernie Sanders' mouth and vice versa?
Yes, that would be feasible with the type of technology that exists now. You can basically take the target image, the person who you're going to portray in the phony video, and then an actor can ventriloquize a fake conversation or debate or a speech, and make it look, and the final video will look like your target is giving the speech, one that they never actually delivered. A very crude version of this got attention back in May when a video of Nancy Pelosi got some circulation on social media. That was not a deep fake video. Artificial intelligence was not involved. It was simply a manipulation that involved slowing the video down in such a way that it made Speaker Pelosi appear to be inebriated while she was delivering some public remarks. This was identified over the course of a couple of days as being a fraud, but it took a little while to happen, and for interesting and strange reasons, Facebook ultimately declined to take that video down, even though everyone came to the conclusion that it was false.
Well, that gets us to the remedy that you suggest first and foremost, which seems to be getting the social media to remove provably false content and do it quickly. Why have they been reluctant to go that far?
They're reluctant because, in their own words, they don't want to be seen as arbiters of the truth. They don't want to have the responsibility of sorting out true from false. The problem is that in their line of work, and given the tendency of bad actors to try to distort and misuse social media tools, they are inevitably forced into the role of taking down all kinds of categories of harmful content, whether it's hate speech or bullying or child pornography, what have you. There's a whole list of those things. In addition, they are already, in their words, downranking, meaning making less prominent on their sites content that they deem false, but they do not remove it altogether out of this anxiety they have about not being seen as making those kinds of decisions. It's my contention, the contention of my center, that they ought to just go ahead and take it down, preserving a copy of the content in question in a cordoned off archive that people could look at but not further share and disseminate. I think there are pieces of content that really are of no value. They're not contributing to the marketplace of ideas and can be removed. This could be a contention such as the one that the Pope had endorsed Donald Trump for president, or President Obama was born in Kenya, or the Holocaust never happened. Contentions like that, I think, are at this point intended to cause confusion and sow discord, and I think it would be wise to simply remove them.
Instagram and WhatsApp have come to the fore since the 2016 election starred Facebook and Twitter. What do these guys have to do?
They need to, in the case of Instagram, install the policies and procedures that are already in place on Facebook at Instagram to make it easier to remove questionable material. Instagram, I should emphasize, is owned by Facebook, as is WhatsApp. On WhatsApp, which was the site of a tremendous amount of disinformation in the recent Brazilian and Indian elections, the Facebook, which has been moving in this direction, needs to further restrict the degree to which users can forward information to a large number of groups of people, which has been a mechanism that WhatsApp users in Brazil and India have used to spread false and demeaning and confusing information.
The Europeans seem to think there's a role for government, but Americans are leery of censorship and partisanship and a president who tweets. And where do you come down?
The distinction you make is absolutely correct. The Europeans, particularly Germany, France, and some other countries, have moved rather aggressively toward trying to regulate content, specifically hate speech and what they refer to as fake news, under the notion that certain types of communication have no value. This is an illustration of different sets of values in Europe versus the United States. There is no provision in France or Germany similar to the First Amendment that protects speech against government regulation. And as a result, in this country, it would be, in all likelihood, unconstitutional for Congress to try to restrict the kind of content that appeared on the social media platforms. That's just not the case in Europe. And there are different histories and different cultural norms. Germany, for example, has all kinds of hate speech restrictions and restrictions on references to Nazism that grow out of the terrible 20th century history of Germany. So, different approaches for different cultures. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that. But I do think it would be a mistake for the U.S. Congress to try to move following suit of the European countries.
Well, finally, do you have any further recommendations?
The final recommendation I would offer would be to users. In the end, it is a shared responsibility between users and the owners and operators of these social media platforms to be wary and skeptical of disinformation. So I think users have to look at what they encounter online with a fair degree of skepticism, with the understanding that what they see or read may be false, and if it is, that they should, rather than share it, they should flag it for the platform operators in hopes that it might be restricted. So I think that would be my advice.
And tell their children. On this edition of Update One, we've been talking with Paul Barrett, a career journalist with the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg Businessweek, now adjunct professor and deputy director of the Stern Center for Business and Human Rights at New York University. I'm Irv Chapman at the National Press Club in Washington. Thank you.
Update One is a production of the National Press Club's Broadcast Podcast Committee. You can comment on this podcast or any episode of Update One by sending an email to updateonepodcast, that's update, the number one podcast, @gmail.com. Thanks for listening to Update One.